Bitcoin just hit the 200 daily simple moving average, and the S&P 500 is down 10% from its all-time highs. Are we still in a risk-off scenario, or are we increasing now the risk going into CPI today? As the data awaits, let's dive into some technical analysis from myself, Coach Igor at Chat Champions. So here you can see this is the daily chart on the CME, and we can see that BTC yesterday on Tuesday the 11th of March we hit the 200 simple daily moving average, and we have closed the day bullish for quite some time now. There's been quite a few gaps that have all been filled, and we have just filled the gap at 77,885 ish. So I'll talk you through my plan on Bitcoin on the daily, weekly and monthly time frame. So let's start with the good old daily plan that I share with all the members at Chart Champions. So here we can start with the daily, and the daily order flow is now one time framing higher because yesterday we broke the previous day high. So for that, I'm going to zoom in into the bar chart here on the left, and I'm going to show you what that means. So this is Monday and this is Tuesday. We have now broken Monday's high. Therefore, this has gone from the daily being one time framing lower to now one time framing higher. Okay, that has been broken. So this is why here we have now one time framing up. The weekly, however, is still down, and the monthly is still down. I can show you that too. So let's go on the weekly. You can see here on the weekly, and I'm going to hide these moving averages, that we are still one time framing down. So this is the previous week, broken to the downside, so moving lower. And then this is the monthly, again, broken to the downside and moving lower. Okay, so each bar represents a month, and each bar here represents a weekly, and then this one here represents a daily. And you can see here that we are now breaking one time framing higher on the daily for the RTH, regular trading hours. This is what I track for the CME. Okay, so now we have daily one time framing up, weekly one time framing down, and monthly one time framing down. So yesterday, the RTH session closed somehow or somewhat with a kind of a B shape. So for that, I'm going to show you the profile here, which is this purple profile. You can see sort of a B shape here, and that is like a trend continuation where we should expect like a breakout to the upside or a breakout to the downside on these two value nodes, one sitting in around that 83,500 and the other one sitting in at 81,000. Okay, so breaking each ways, so breaking the highs could increase the odds for a break into the gap fill at 85, and inversely, breaking the lows around 80,000 could increase the odds for a rotation back down to at least 79,500-ish. Okay, so we have that B shape, but the value here, the value is super important, and we actually have value higher. So from Monday into Tuesday, we actually had value overlapping to higher. This is positive for Bitcoin. So yeah, keeping an eye on value as always. The week highs or lows, we do have, in my opinion, this region here around 84,200. I class this as a little bit of a poor structure because you have these highs, and then you have now once more yesterday high, and then this morning high as well. So very, very close together, meaning that price likes to come back to these regions, these areas, and trade through to complete those auctions. So I have marked this at 84,200 as a weak reference, and we should have them on our charts because they can become nice places for example, a target for a long trade or a potential short trade should we reject there. So the sentiment, I'm going with neutral. We can see here on this profile, and I'm going to hide price just so that you focus purely on the actual value of the profile. And you can see here's the high, here's the low, but the point of control from yesterday's trading session is kind of at the midpoint, representing here with the red mid letters. So when we have a point of control at the mid of the profile, I'm always going to stick to the neutral side of like sentiment being bullish or bearish. Okay, so neutral sentiment there. And then let's look at the overnight. So we have open outside value from yesterday. So you can see here, here's the open. We opened slightly outside, and then we came down to rebalance and we bounce from the point of control. You can see here we bounced earlier this morning from the point of control, and we're making our way back up into the current value around 82,900 to 83. So this is where price is finding value now, exactly where we are, 82,700, call it. So yeah, neither long or short, it's just a little bit balanced here. You can see all the point of controls kind of lining up together. So one here at 82,400, this one at 81,900, this one here is slightly below 81,500. So you can see we're building the value around here towards the highs of these moves. So indicating that potentially price might want to push a little bit higher. And we can just see it here. So since we've made the low into that 200 simple moving average, you can see that we've been making slow but surely higher high and higher low, another higher high, potential higher low, and now we're just heading back up again. So yeah, kind of like an interesting side to the market now upon hitting this 200 SMA, because it's a good reference that should give us that nice support, especially going into obviously CPI data today, and the S&P being so sold off already 10% from its all-time highs. But okay, so we don't have any gaps in between here. The tempo, I'm going to focus this a little bit more later when the CPI data kicks in. But for now, let's focus on some context and some levels. So ES is down 10% from the all-time highs, and I'll show you that here. So let's go to the chart of ES, S&P 500, and I'm just going to pull it up. You can see that we've actually gone through the 200 again on the daily. So we've had 1, twice, 3 days around the simple moving average. We closed 1 day bullish, okay, and that was on Friday last week, and then on Monday and Tuesday we kept the continuation lower through that 200. And this is a place again where I don't want to get too bearish once we're below a 200 simple moving average. On the retest, sure, but while we're quite far away from it, I refrain from like being too short in the market. So we can see by measuring the high, so this is the all-time high, down to the current low, we just hit that 10% mark, meaning that typically that kind of correction may be getting exhausted. So this is not a place where we want to position ourselves with more risk off. This is a place where potentially investors look to, add some risk back onto the table. Okay, but that's ES there. So yeah, being 10% from all-time highs and BTC just hitting this 200 simple daily moving average. Is Bitcoin too bearish? Sure, but we can't ignore these references. Bitcoin is now a Wall Street ETF, just like the S&P 500. So we have to treat it as such. So when, when you compare it to before, where we were looking at a decentralized currency, it still is, but because we have institutional on the side now, looking at this, it is an ETF. Therefore, we kind of have to look at this as a investment for the future pensions and etc. So coming down to these references, we shouldn't really be too bearish and more kind of like thinking long term. And that's how I'm looking at this more on BTC. So with so much fear on the market currently as well, so obviously being 10% down on ES, that kind of brings the other side where are we a little bit too sold off now? Is this a good place to start position ourselves to, you know, a nice bounce or a relief rally. So yeah, CPI today, is this a good time now to start looking for investing in trading opportunities? As always, we must trade with value. And just a quick recap on value here. So just looking at the purple here, this is the regular trading hours. You can see that we've been trading lower and lower since some time now. So you can see value, and I'm going to hide the overnight so that we focus purely just on the RTH, and I'm going to hide price again. So just to recap, because it's super, super important. So overlapping to lower, and now we're shifting to the upside. So today is going to be very interesting, where we can see, okay, where's value? Because if the value keeps building higher towards the gap fill, then that's a very positive. But if we start shifting lower, then I'm going to have to look for lower targets, including the 70Ks, all the way down there. But yeah, let me talk you through these targets now. So for the upside, and I'm going to put the candle so that you can see it. So for the upside, I'm looking for my first level going into CPI today around the highs here. And that is going to be the week high at 84,215. Okay, so that's going to be my first level. My second level, it's going to have to be that gap fill. And I'm going to show you that by zooming in into the RTH chart. So this is the RTH chart. And you can see that we have the gap being 85,905. I have an alert in between just to alert me should we trade there during the impact news a little bit later. So 85 is going to be my first level, reference level of resistance to the upside. And then the second level, the third level is going to be 89,500. In other words, should BTC claim that gap around the 85,900, I see it trade all the way up to that 89,500-ish, which is the untested value area high for this profile here on Friday the 7th. Okay, so that sits in around that $89,500. Okay, so again, first level 84,200, second level 85,900, and my third and last level, that's going to be 89. So this is for the bullish case should we get that nice move back inside that gap fill. Okay, so now the bearish case and the bearish targets are, if we reject either one or second level here of resistance, I'll be aiming all the way back down to that 200 simple moving average, which is sitting in around that 77, which is the second target. So 77.75, yeah, around the 200 SMA. So it would look something like so. Let's say price pushes through during CPI and the news into anywhere between the poor high or weak highs into the gap fill. Okay, we can then, given the trade, meaning do we get a swing high, do we get a good entry for a short trade here, then we could potentially bring this down to the first target, which is value low. That's why I've got it marked at 79,760. That could be the first target. Or are we going to push all the way down past the 200 simple moving average? If so, this could be the trade going into CPI today that I kind of like. But then obviously just trail your stop down, because we could go as low as that 70K, as I was saying. And that 70K is like the max pain scenario that I see for BTC currently. So I like the low currently, but I can see a case or an argument for another push through that 200 simple moving average, completely entering the gap lower and filling that gap all the way down there around that 70K. And I'm going to try and zoom in here on the left to show you where that gap sits so that you know exactly what it is. So this is the pre-Trump election pump, and just before that we had a gap when we left the big range that we spent for so long, just above that 50K psychological big figure. So that is the gap there between 74 and 70. That, in my opinion, will be the max pain scenario. Okay, but going into today, these are the closest levels I have. So first one being the high there at 84,200. Second one just around that gap being filled, and obviously lastly the 89,500 all the way up there. So I'll be monitoring these levels for a potential trade, and then depending on the context going into the numbers, if let's say we are down into the value area low, which is my first level of support, depending on the reaction here, then I can push a long trade into those values. In other words, it depends on where we trade first. Let's say we go up first, then I'll potentially be looking for the short trade back down to, target 1, target 2, potentially even a little bit lower. Or if we trade down first, then potentially what I will be looking for is the opposite trade. So it's all very relative to where we're going to go first. And that will be the indication of what trade I'll be taking. Am I taking the short because we went up first and we got a nice swing high? Or am I taking the long because we came down first and clean business done here? And we've got 3 references: the 6-month EQ, value area low around that 79,700-ish, and then we obviously have the lows, which is 77, call it 100, and then obviously a little bit lower we have the gap low at 74, and potentially could go a little bit deeper. So we have a few scenarios and a few levels, and this is what I'm looking at BTC for the next few trades going into today and potentially even a little bit further. I am long on BTC already, and I would prefer to see a push towards the gap fill, but as trading, it's all about obviously the probabilities, and there's no real certainties. We just have to trade those probabilities and always look after risk management. So that's it really from me on BTC. So just to zoom out a little bit so that you don't lose sight of the higher picture, we have just hit the 200 simple moving average on the daily. This is a really good and key level for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is no longer just a currency, a cryptocurrency. It has been followed very closely by the Wall Street boys and the Wall Street market, right? And we can treat just as we treat SPY, QQQ, because it is an ETF now. And when it comes to an asset, becoming part of an ETF, we have to look long term. So, if we zoom right out, we can see that BTC is somewhat a resemblance of, an ES NQ. So, don't lose sight of the higher time frame. And it is still on a really nice bull market. And this is the pivot where we can then switch from bullish to bearish should we lose it, back test it. But there's a lot of time in between. And markets don't just go up and up and up and up forever, as well as they don't go down and down and down forever. So is this the time to be a little bit more aware of what's going on and a little bit more or less risk off? Time will tell. But yeah, that's it from me. Thank you very much for being here. If you like this video, let me know. I will sure make more. But yeah, like, subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you and goodbye.